Good morning and welcome to our webinar on why delivering the S in ESG has become an urgent imperative for a sustainable business future. I'm Debra Lee, I'm the Regional Director in the Northwest for People Puzzles, and you'll also be able to see Vic Foster, who is one of our People Directors, who is also qualified for ESG and an accredited B Corp professor, so definitely our in-house expert. Vic and I have been immersed in the world of ESG for a while now, and we're delighted to be able to share some of the thinking that we've got with you, and hopefully you'll feel in a very practical way that you can go away and do something about following the webinar. So just for your information, we are recording the webinar. You will be sent the link afterwards, so you will all receive this. And before we start, if we can ask that you have your phone handy, we're going to be using something called Slido. And I'll reveal a little bit more about that in a second, but you will need your phone to hand. If you can just keep that next to you, that would be fabulous. As you look across the bottom of the screen, we've disabled the chat function. So if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, if you can put them in the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we've got time for a Q&A at the end, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can when we reach that point. So we'll move on to the agenda then. We're going to start with an introduction to ESG, which will be delivered by me. And I'll take you through the history and evolution of ESG, and we'll talk a little bit about the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And then I'm going to hand over to Vic, who's going to take you through thinking about your purpose for getting involved with ESG and how that aligns to your business strategy. So what are your key drivers and why? And then Vic will do a deeper dive into what are the elements of E, S and G, the key factors that sit under each of those pillars, and then focus on why social sustainability is key to a resilient business. So we'll spend a little bit of time in addition on the S of ESG. And then we're going to go with some top tips and some ideas for you to get started and get moving on this. And as I say, and then we'll finish with a Q&A. So the next section is a little quiz to get us started. So if I can ask that everyone scans the QR code with your phone, or you can go through slido.com and insert the number on here, which is #1508441. It'll ask you to input your name. Don't worry, we won't attribute any answers or anything to you, but what you'll find is we'll be able to show both that we're going to use it for a quiz and for a poll. So if as many of you as can join as possible, that would be fantastic, because it means we'll get some instant views from you. If anyone's used Slido before, it's quite an exciting function to use, particularly on a webinar. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to be able to join. So I'll talk you through how the quiz is going to work. Basically, we're just going to give you 20 seconds or so. And a question, we've got 5 questions. When they come up, you will have 4 options. So it's like being back at school with a multiple choice. Don't worry about it. Don't overthink it. Just go with your instant intuition in terms of the correct answer. And what will happen then is the 4 answers will come up with not who's voted for who, but the percentages. And when we've got most of the responses back in, we'll then show you all the results. So we've got about 3/4 of the people have joined. So if people are still wanting to join, you can join and as we go through. But I think we'll get started on the quiz. So if we can move to the first question. So we're starting off with, what does ESG stand for? Does it stand for environmental, shareholder, global, ethical, sustainable, green, environmental, social, governance, economic, social, growth? If you can click your answers now, and then we'll wait until we've got most of the responses in, and then we'll start to show you the answer. Okay, Vic, if we can move through and see how everyone's done on this question. Brilliant. What a fantastic audience. We've got 100% correct. So that the correct answer is environmental, social and governance. We have managed to catch some people out even with that one before. So second question, which of the following is an example of a social factor? So is it carbon emissions, diversity and leadership, return on investment, energy consumption? Let's have your answers now. Brilliant. So most people getting this right, 96% going for the correct answer, which is diversity and leadership. So on to our next question. Which term refers to the practice of disclosing non-financial information to stakeholders? Is it impact reporting, financial auditing, regulatory compliance, or risk management? Well done. 82% getting impact reporting as the correct answer. So the next question, which concept involves considering long-term sustainability goals alongside short-term profits? Is it shareholder primacy, greenwashing, triple bottom line, or short selling? You're doing brilliantly. So the correct answer is triple bottom line, and 75% of people got that right. So I think this is the last one for you. We're on carbon now. So what does carbon neutrality mean for a company? Does it mean emitting no carbon emissions, offsetting carbon emissions through renewable energy projects, balancing carbon emissions with carbon removal efforts, or reducing carbon emissions by half? What do you think carbon neutrality means? So the majority have gone for balancing carbon emissions with carbon removal effects, and 89% of people got that right. So thank you so much for your interaction in our quiz. And congratulations to Tim. So this is not only did you get them all right, but actually it's if you've done it in the quickest time as well. So well done, Tim. Okay. So we're going to move on to talk. I'll talk you through what we're going to cover off today. So you're all aware that ESG is obviously becoming increasingly important, not only for businesses, but particularly for investors. And there is an expectation now from stakeholders, candidates, employees, that companies will manage their impacts on the environment and society responsibly whilst demonstrating those good governance practices. So what are we aiming to do today? We would like to educate and inform you of the importance to your business, enable you to think about how this integrates into your own business strategy. Well, hopefully you will tell us when you come away that you've learned a bit more about the importance and the factors and how it aligns to your purpose, understand the benefits of the responsible practices, and understand the factors that sit under ESG and what you can actually do about them. And what we'd really like is to create a host of people who actually are feeling inspired and energized to go out and become leaders of ESG within your organisation, driving some positive change. So if we look at this timeline, you can see that actually the concept of ESG goes way back. And we used to call it social responsible investing back in the 60s, but the term ESG has actually been around since the 90s. So if I take you forward to the things that probably are more recent and top of mind. So in COP21, this is the point when all the countries across the world pledged to limit global warming to below 2 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. And on the back of that, the 17 sustainable development goals were developed. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. In COP26, you will have heard quite a lot of noise about how far we were behind on those targets. So this was the one in Glasgow. And there was quite a lot of concern being raised that we weren't moving fast enough. But actually, rather than me talk about that, what I'm going to do is show you the Sustainable Development Goals video, which actually tells you that story and what's going on.
8 years left to end poverty and hunger, to halve global emissions. It didn't start out as planned. We're not moving in the right direction. Years of progress lost in the pandemic. Escalating conflicts, climate breakdown. So where are we now? For decades, we successfully fought poverty. Now it's on the rise again. 1 out of 10 suffer from hunger, more people than ever forced out of their homes. Climate disasters increasing. Droughts alone estimated to displace 700 million people by 2030. This year, CO2 emissions hit a new record. At this rate, annual emissions will be 14% higher in 2030. Meanwhile, fossil energy receives $700 billion in subsidies from governments. Government. Safe water and sanitation not made accessible fast enough. Progress must quadruple to cover all people by 2030. Women are held back at all levels. At this pace, by 2030, 825 million children won't have secondary level education. Human rights, health, and equality all hurt in the wake of war and disaster. Disrupted economies, food and energy crisis, and galloping costs of living damage global solidarity. Everything interconnected. Everyone intertwined. Business as usual won't cut it. Even though we made progress before, going back to pre-pandemic ways is not enough. We need a new paradigm built on the pillars of our 17 goals. Rethink conventions. Flip the orthodoxies. Governments, organizations, corporations, citizens of the world, snap out of it. It's time for bold climate action. To act for women and girls, for social justice and inclusion. Scale up the transition to renewable energy. Create 85 million green jobs. Phase out fossil fuel subsidies and tax carbon. $2.8 trillion. Keep your promises. Support developing nations. Write off debts. Free up $1 trillion for climate resilience, people, and communities. $500 billion for Africa to achieve universal energy access by 2030. Commit to a circular economy now. New, resilient food systems. They can cut waste by 17%. Strengthen domestic financial institutions. Make insurance and banking accessible to everyone. Scale up the digital transformation to educate the 1.6 billion kids who missed school in the pandemic. Educate girls, including the 130 million not in school now. Ensure women's equal share of decision-making. Eliminate discrimination against female workers and boost productivity by 40%. We cannot afford to leave anyone behind. We have a to-do list. We have the resources. 8 years to reach our goals. We're on this planet together. So let's work together. Let's get the list done.
But we haven't got 8 years, we've got 6.5 years. And you know, so this was produced in 2022. So as a reminder, when the UN goals were put together, it was called a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and planet now and for the future. And these 17 goals were an urgent call to action for all countries. But we're way behind. So the report in 2023 talks about a promise in peril. And just to give you an indicator about what that looks like, there were 140 targets set. Of those, only 12% are on track. Almost half are showing either moderate or severely off track in terms of progress. And 30% have either seen no movement or have regressed below the 2015 baseline. And of course, on Wednesday, you all will have heard when Rishi announced that the petrol and diesel car policy that was intended to come in 2030 has been pushed back 5 years. So why are we talking about these goals? Well, if you look at any business that's done anything on ESG, usually they will refer to these goals. And the first point really is to look at these and say, which of these goals will you already be doing something on within your business? So what we wanted to do was show you what we did in People Puzzles. So we looked and came up with the 5 of the goals that we thought were relevant to us as a people director population in terms of the work we do with our clients. So the first one is good health and well-being. The second one was quality education. The third one, gender equality. The fourth one, decent work and economic growth. And the fifth one for us was reducing inequalities. So as you look across there, depending on your business, your sector, what you do, the service or product that you offer, there will be some that stand out for you straight away. And this is a really good start point to say, what are we already doing that could fit with any of these goals? So if we're working with a client, we'll talk to them about considering this as a start point. So you'll see this when if you look at people's websites in terms of impact reports, they often refer to this as well. So this is the end of my session, and I'm going to hand over to Vic. As I say, Vic is our in-house expert, and she's going to talk you through how you can align your overall business purpose and understand your key drivers on ESG. Thanks. Over to you, Vic.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So the first part of my session on this webinar is to talk to you about how you can understand your overall business purpose and how it aligns with your ESG and your key drivers. So this, effectively, in a nutshell, is your why that you'd start off with, with at the beginning of any piece of work that you do. And to start off, I'm going to talk to you about the McKinsey report that was the 12 key reasons why businesses have an ESG strategy, just to provoke some thought around it. So interesting green issues and sustainability. So, those of you who have got children and grandchildren, there is no planet B, right? So, I think it's the right thing to do. I think businesses are realizing that they have a responsibility to be sustainable and green, as part of the economic infrastructure. Protect income and protect and improve revenue. You'll all have a supply chain, you'll have a client base, and some of you will be already having to report into businesses that you sell to disclose your sustainability stance. Have you got a framework in place already? For those of you who don't, mandatory reporting will be coming down the track, and is coming down, quicker and thicker and faster all the time. Improve brand and reputation. I think if you think about when you even shop in the supermarket, a lot of consumers are saying that they'll buy from businesses who've got an ethical code and have got a sustainable framework, because it makes consumers feel a little bit better about themselves when they do that as well, that they're playing their part. Attracting talent. So Gen Z and millennials particularly are wanting to understand, what's your purpose-driven business, what's your sustainability framework and strategy. Increased customer loyalty and better employment engagement. I'm sure you were all already having conversations with people within your teams wanting to understand, where are we from an ESG point of view and how can I play a part? Cost reduction, energy efficiencies, driving cost reduction, and also linked to that is improved innovation. How can we do more with less, and how can we kind of make it a lot more economically feasible to drive these innovations and initiatives? Securing funding and finance. So lots of lending houses, lots of institutional investment companies are now wanting to see the credentials that a business has for an ESG and sustainability perspective before they'll decide where to put their money. And as I mentioned, compliance with mandatory and pending regulations. I'm sure some of you already will have to report on emissions, report on their scope 1 and 2. There's now indirect emissions reporting that will come into play over the next few months and certainly will be with us in the next 12 to 24 months. So just to give you a bit of, what's the return on investment for ESG? So consumers want to buy from you. So a Harvard Business Report recently said that 82% of consumers choose to buy from purpose-driven brands. companies want to work with you. 91% of companies take sustainability criteria into account in their purchasing decisions. Employers want to work for you. 88% of employees want to work with companies with sustainable agendas. And actually, on top of that, 50% of millennials would actually take a pay cut to work in a business where the sustainability agenda is top of the list. And shareholders want to invest in you. So a recent McKinsey report that investment in ESG companies has doubled since 2020. A few more: improved financial performance. 89% of companies with strong sustainable practices equal or have higher financial performance compared to their industry peers. B Corps certainly are bucking the trend in terms of growth from a revenue, profitability and attracting talent perspective. Better risk management. 90% of companies with strong sustainability practices experience fewer incidents of bribery, corruption and fraud. Innovation and competitiveness. 72% of executives believe sustainability issues are driving innovation and opening up new markets, which has got to be a good thing for everyone. And attracting and retaining talent. 78% of employers consider a company's social and environmental commitments when deciding where to work. It was a white paper that Accenture brought out about 18 months ago. The Polman report. So Paul Polman was the CEO for Unilever from 2009 to 2019 and has since become quite a leading light in terms of thought leadership. He wrote the book Net Positive, which is talking about kind of more collaborative advantage rather than competitive advantage and how businesses can really thrive, making sure they've got an underpinning sustainability strategy that they're really working towards. Some of the key takeaways from a recent Net Positive Employee Barometer was that 2/3 of UK employees want to work for a company that's having a positive impact on the world. Almost 2/3 of employees in the UK say that the efforts by businesses to tackle environmental and societal challenges don't go far enough, with many believing the CEO and senior leaders don't care. And nearly half of employees in the UK say they would consider resigning if the company's values didn't align with their own. And 1/3 of people saying they've already done so. So pretty sobering statistics there, really. We did our own survey of around 100 of our clients, and we asked them, why they're putting ESG on the table. What are the key priorities when they're considering ESG and putting an ESG strategy in place? And these are the key priorities. They're the top 4 that we identified across our client survey. So company reputation and brand, new business and markets opening up, absolutely key for, everyone will be feeling the pain of recruitment at the moment. So talent attraction and retention is an absolute up there as a key priority. And interesting green issues, sustainability, and taking responsibility as a company. So the next piece from is we'd really like you to pick your phones up again and tell us what your 3 drivers are of that list. Ooh. That's brilliant. Thank you for feeding back into that. I mean, we did a session with Debs and I presented a session over in Bazaars yesterday with about sort of 45 clients, and actually sort of the ones that are really resonating on this list was very similar to theirs. So key piece is improved brand and reputation, interested in sustainability and green issues and attracting talent. So that kind of very much marries into the feedback that we got yesterday from the clients we presented to. So thank you for that. We've also done our own from People Puzzles. So this is how our ESG drivers link into our own purpose, vision, and values. So our key priorities were sustainability. It's the right thing to do, and whilst everyone's kind of talking about greenwashing out there, we go into and work alongside clients and really partner them to actually set up their own rigor and robust ESG strategy. So we wouldn't be doing the right thing, certainly, if we weren't to have a strong ESG strategy of our own. So company brand and reputation, we're people, we're going in and advising at the senior level of businesses, sitting on the board, calling them, provoking some conversation about what the right thing to do is, and making sure that we've got those frameworks and strategies in place for our clients. And talent attraction and retention, we're a service business, we're a consultancy business. We're only as good as the people directors and the regional directors and our support functions that we employ. So it's really key to us that when we recruit and we are really keen to retain people who've got the right DNA, the right mindset, the right growth mindset and skill set that's shared by us. So then sitting beside that is our purpose. So we help businesses and people thrive. Our vision to be known and recognised across the UK as a trusted people experts that deliver commercial value to ambitious mid-sized companies. Goals, delighting long-term clients, a happy team, walking the talk and impacting people's lives. And there are metrics sitting underneath those with our values, always passionate, win-win. We're still learning. I think particularly ESG has taught me that every day is different and every day it's evolving, and people and companies are still learning huge amounts and being pragmatic. So I'm going to explore kind of the ESG factors now. So now we've kind of talked a little bit more about the why. This is the how. So when I start working, or when any of the people directors start working with a client, this will be the first part what we talk about. So let's really get an assessment on where are we now? What's the baseline measures? Where, I've read amber green ourselves around environmental impact, social impact, and governance. And ESG factors to consider amongst those, from environmental point of view, is climate change strategy. How do we adapt to climate risks and impacts? And in terms of your emissions and how your business activity and how it survives, how does it impact on biodiversity, water efficiency, energy efficiency, carbon intensity? What's your environmental footprint? And how do we manage, how do we put some systems in to manage that environmental output? Now, we're not environmental scientists, but what we do is we work in partnership with environmental experts, and we can certainly make sure that you're talking to the right person to really get under the bonnet and look at these efficiencies. Social, the title of today's webinar is, certainly where's the S? And the S for us is absolutely our sweet spot. We're coming in, helping businesses shape people agendas, shape positive social impact. And here's some examples of work we do that will really drive that social impact. So aligning business strategies to the UN SDGs, shaping up a strong people strategy, which absolutely aligns to ESG. Conducting stakeholder materiality assessments. This is really looking at who your stakeholders are, the communities you serve, your employees, the people on your board, your shareholders, your customers. What are they saying? What are their vantage points? And let's drive an ESG strategy that absolutely delivers to all those stakeholders. Putting in place recruitment and talent attraction strategies, then managing that talent, developing that talent, learning and development, and making sure that well-being initiatives and frameworks are in place. Putting a lens on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also looking at the social and community impact that your business has. So, not just going out and offering volunteering days, which is absolutely great, incidentally, but also, what's the measure of that? How do we know that the communities we serve and the charities that we work alongside are really benefiting from our efforts? Policy design and development, reward and recognition, communication frameworks and engagement surveys, and really kind of acting on that feedback from stakeholder engagement. Health and safety, developing sustainability roadmaps, also rolling out training on ESG and sustainability to your teams. Impact reporting. So, once you've got baselines and you have a framework in place, how are you going to measure that and keep reporting on that and drive continuous improvement? And I'll come on to in a minute, ESG certification and accreditations. Of course, all of these parts of the pinwheel, none of them are mutually exclusive. So we'll work really closely with other board members, with other senior teams, and with cross-functional working groups to make sure that we've got some strong rigor and robust governance in place. So talking about business ethics, I always trip over that. I always trip over my tongue when I say those words. Compliance, leadership and corporate governance, risk management, anti-corruption and bribery policies and processes, board independence and transparency of remuneration and exec compensation. Again, putting some rigor into governance around policies and procedures that help you really kind of make sure that there's strong compliance within your business, and reporting and monitoring that. And also looking at actually how we're going out there and demonstrating that to our consumers, to our value chain, to our supply chain rigor. And the key factor within the social dimension, people talk about, when they talk about ESG, they talk about environment, huge, and they talk about green, and that's absolutely fundamental, no doubt about it. But, while environmental and governance aspects have received considerable attention, social dimensions are often overlooked. And this is where a people director and HR professional can really help with, applying their expertise in people management and culture. So some here below are some of the key factors that a people director can certainly enable and lead in your organisation to drive the social pillar of ESG strategy. So engagement in corporate culture, equity, inclusion, diversity, well-being, strengthening practices, policies and procedures, engaging with communities to ensure that you're actually delivering a positive social impact, which is making a real difference across the communities you serve. Equal pay and fair compensation, transparency reporting, and ethical supply chains. And here's the start for 10, really. I mean, I think that all of the, when you talk about ESG, there's huge amounts of it, it's swathes of it, and sometimes it can be really overwhelming. So I putting this slide up to really talk about, some of the work that we're doing with clients at the moment, and some ideas and, starters for 10, top tips for your businesses. So implementing, just call out a few of these. So implementing energy efficient practices in the workplace, adopting renewable energy sources, encouraging public transport for commuting or shared commuting. Hybrid working, it helps enormously in terms of reducing carbon for commuting. But don't forget that we also need to keep track on the carbon that's been burned for every individual, which will roll up into your own carbon footprint for the business. From a social point of view, employee learning and development opportunities, hybrid and flexible working to support work-life balance, family-friendly policies in place, creating a safe workplace for all employees. And then on governance, ethical policies and procedures, independence of board, and encouraging shareholders' engagement and communication. So what can you do from today? Well, my first recommendation is always look at your business strategy through an ESG lens and apply it to every part of your business. As I said when I first started talking, ESG strategy isn't another strategy. It should be absolutely embedded in your overarching business strategy. Stakeholder engagement. So engagement with your key stakeholders, investors, customers, employees, communities that you serve, to understand what their ESG concerns are and their expectations of the business. And use that feedback to shape your ESG strategy and priorities. Get stakeholder groups together. Teams love to be involved in this, and and lots of people are crying out for the businesses to do more in it. When we roll out engagement surveys and support businesses at the moment, we're including the Gallup People and Planet 5 questions, and they're on the screen now for you. So if I raise a concern about ethics and integrity, I'm confident my employer would do what is right. At work, I'm treated with respect. There is someone at work who encourages my development. My organisation cares about my well-being, and my organisation makes a positive impact on people and planet. I mean, thinking about how you're going to establish that and drive that positive impact, these are the questions I'll be posing. I encourage you to pose with your senior team and with each of your levels of business, of employee base. So what's our mission and purpose, and what social values are most relevant to our business? How can we align social impact with our core business activities? What are our strengths and resources to do so? And what opportunities are there for innovation? And once you've got your measures and your baselines, then it's a case of considering, when do you want to deliver your first impact report and feed out there what you're actually doing to drive positive impact? Then also, how often do you then adapt it? How often do you share it? And how do you continue to measure it so you're confident that you are constantly looking at continuous improvement within the business? I'm often asked these days, and certainly since I became a B Corp assessor, is to what sort of accreditation or certification a business should pursue. So B Corp is kind of the one that's talked about most. It's probably the gold standard, I would suggest, of a business certification to demonstrate they're a business for good. But there's lots besides. So here's just a few of the ones that we will recommend that you pursue, or that you can certainly do some exploration to find out more about them. I'm going to pass back on to Debs now, who's going to talk to you about how we work as a business and what you could expect when engaging with a people director.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks for a great session. So we thought it might be helpful to share with you some of our methodology in terms of getting going on this topic, which is, as Vic said, can be quite daunting. So what we'd usually do with the business is work with the board and the senior leadership team to help define the purpose, the need, and the scope of the strategy and how that fits with your key drivers. And then usually we'd create a working group where we would assess the current performance, what are the gaps, and what are the recommendations in order to move those measures on. And that then forms a strategy. So we would then work with the team to develop a core strategy for your business that sits alongside your current commercial goals and your values. And the next stage really is to take that out. So how do you train all your employees and managers to understand, have a raised awareness and understand why the business is going this way and is involved in that? And of course, by doing that, the payback is that actually you get much more involvement from the team, and often people want to champion certain things, and there's lots of people doing stuff out of work that maybe they haven't shared with you already. And then we would then move into sort of what could the report look like? What should we be disclosing? If you are already having to report against some mandatory regulations and standards, and as we say, we think those are coming down the track for smaller businesses at a rate of knots, then what does that look like? So actually, if it is going to come your way, let's be ready so that you know what you're going to be reporting against. So the next slide just shows a visual image of what that can look like. So, and you may be able to do some of this yourself, but obviously this is how we would approach it. So we'd start with that executive board session so that we're really clear on the why and why we're going to do this stuff. Then work with the working group to develop the strategy and the action plan and agree those reporting and impact measures. We have partners, so we're not carbon experts, we are not the environmental experts, but we know people who are. And you do really need to get a carbon footprint at some stage in terms of understanding your baseline on those numbers and actually how you can impact those and move those on. And then, as I say, that final stage is really around involving everyone in the business. So launching the strategy, engaging the employees and ensuring that everyone's got an opportunity to contribute. And depending on the size and sector and headcount and how complex the business is and how industrial versus sort of a service type business, that obviously they will need different elements in terms of that content and that breadth. So it can be as little as 4 days, but obviously it can also step up in terms of what's required. So I think I was hoping that by sharing how we do that, that might bring that to life for you. And this is a simple example of getting something on a page, a strategy on a page that the whole of the workforce can tie into in terms of what we're going to do, what the goals are, what the outcomes are we're looking for, and what the impact we want to achieve. And this for us would be where we would want to get our clients to a point where actually people in the business understand and know what we're doing and why and what we're trying to achieve. So I hope that sort of brings that to life for you. Obviously, if anyone wants to have a conversation with me or Vic, we always offer a free 30-minute exploratory call. So don't feel you have to do this completely on your own. If you want to just have a chat with us, there's no obligation at the end of that, but hopefully we can help shape your thinking. So that's an offer that's there. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into the Q&A. And I've got a couple of questions that we received ahead of the webinar that I'm going to pose to Vic to share, because I think these are quite relevant to most of the questions that we could receive. So first one, Vic, is how can a board improve their positive social contribution?
Okay, so I would say the first starting point of that is having a clear purpose and values pinned down, and getting commitment from all the people, all the stakeholders who are in that boardroom meeting, as you're driving that strategy. So I think, without the absolute commitment and buy-in of the top team, these things are going to fall over. So I'd absolutely make sure that everyone's aligned at the senior team. The next piece I'd advise on is really going out and understanding what stakeholders, what your stakeholder assessment is. So, what is it, what's identifying and engaging with your key stakeholders, with your employees, with your customers, with your supply base, and with the community. And then really starting to then draw up a social responsibility strategy. I think the social impact absolutely dovetails into ESG holistically anyway. But really, I think it's making sure that, are we doing something that you can measure, and there's actually, we're affecting some change, we're affecting some positive impact, as opposed to kind of pushing things out there and saying, right, okay, well, we give to charity, we do volunteering, we do some great stuff, but actually, is it making a difference?
Yeah, great, thank you. So we've got a question that's just been posed. I've got a couple that are in the Q&A. So how does ESG sit alongside GRC within an organisation?
GRC, I'm not familiar with the terms GRC, so apologies.
Oh, so if the person that posed it could just explain the acronym, and then if we can answer it, we will, and if not, we can pick it up separately. Thank you. The other question that's posed in the Q&A box was, it was posed at the point where we were talking through the sustainable UN goals. And obviously someone's flagged, and it's absolutely spot on. 17 goals is high. If as a corporate business, you'd all be saying that's too many with 140 sub goals. And how do you prioritize that? So what's our sort of thoughts on that? Obviously, we shared the fact that we focus on 5 within our organization, but what's your view about it? Does feel quite overwhelming when you hear 140 targets, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, these were written by heads of state, people who are leading our countries, and our continents and our planet to get some really ambitious goals. And maybe I think from a really funneling that down from as individuals, as citizens of the planet, and also as businesses and responsible businesses, I would say you probably need to do a bit of homework in terms of understanding what's most pertinent to your business. And as we kind of illustrated when we did the slide, in terms of how do we impact positive change as individuals, associates, and People Puzzles as a business, it's what's pertinent to you. I mean, I know there's a couple of my clients on this webinar, and I would say some of those that resonate for those businesses would be Life on Land. They're supporting infrastructure companies in the service they provide, for example. I think there's lots of things you can do in terms of the communities you serve and what's really important about education. So lots of businesses will be consultants of themselves and could offer pro bono work in their skill set to really give, look at one of them is sort of girls and women's equality. So how do we really open the doors up to make sure that people, regardless of gender, regardless of demographic, are really getting those opportunities? So I'd probably encourage businesses to have a overarching view of them, understand what each of them need, and really what's most pertinent to them.
Great, thank you. So we've had a response. So GRC is governance, risk and compliance. So the original question, Vic, was
okay, right.
How does the ESG sit alongside the governance, risk and compliance function within an organisation?
Well, I would say that the risk and compliance, wherever that sits in your existing infrastructure, and sometimes people have separate compliance and risk businesses depending on how regulated they are, but also usually this sits with finance. I would say it's actually making sure that, like any business strategy, that everything's interwoven. So Governance will have a part to play in terms of, leading and having, an accountability of delivery of certain parts of the ESG strategy. And that will be probably picked up and run with by risk or finance or compliance. So I think it's really a case of maybe not looking at all these things as separate pillars, but actually as a strategy, how do they weave into one another?
That makes sense. So a question that probably is one of those sort of how questions, really. So what would be included on an ESG action plan?
Okay, so I would say the first bit is, as taking it right back. When you're addressing a strategy, it's thinking about, okay, so why are we doing this, and what fundamentally do we want to get out of it at the end, and how do we want to deliver that positive impact? I think, getting some clear goals and objectives in place. Again, I kind of mentioned it in, linked into a question earlier, is making sure you've got the engagement of stakeholders. Who's going to be your steering group? Who's going to lead that strategy in terms of the objectives and goals, and how do we know we're going to get there? But then, again, depending on the size and scope, I'd probably put a working group in place cross-functionally to really hold people accountable for delivering and then measuring it, because I think, in any business, and we'll all know that whatever gets measured gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question, what are employer obligations and the mandatory requirements regarding ESG in the UK? So what do we have to do?
So there's, depending on the size, again, and who you are and what you do, there's already a lot of governance around businesses. We went into delivering to partner with Mazars yesterday, and they were talking about new regulation around sort of anti-bribery and transparency in terms of financial reporting. So that absolutely is fundamental to a business. In terms of environmental regulations, scope 1 and 2, if you're kind of a more industrial player within your industrial sector, you're already having to report on what your greenhouse gas emissions are and what your carbon emission, what your carbon footprint looks like. That's going to become regulation for all industries soon, regardless of size and scope. So, my advice would always be, let's get ahead of it, so we're not scrabbling to and then find out there's loads of work. When you lift the lid, there's loads of work to be done. Modern slavery is often that's people have got to have a modern slavery act policy in place. Gender pay reporting is something that's becoming very, very common in businesses. So there's lots of things that already are in existence, and there's more from the climate task force that will come into place over the next year or so around more reporting on environmental footprinting as well.
Right. And for those people who haven't heard that terminology in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3, would you just do a really quick overview of what scope 1, 2, and 3 means?
Yeah, because so scope 1 and 2 are largely sort of what's your absolute direct emissions, so through your business activity, what are you actually burning? What carbon are you producing? What impacts are you having around biodiversity? What's your water consumption? And then the overarching greenhouse gas emissions. Scope 2 is really sort of your value chain, or any businesses that hang off any group activity. And then also your indirect emissions. So, for example, if you partner with a logistics company, what are their emissions for getting onto the road, getting a fleet onto the road, and how much carbon are they burning, for example? That's going to be part of your scope 2 and 3 emissions.
Right. Vic, something's come up that actually came up yesterday. So it's not a question necessarily, but I do think it's worth raising the comment and just discussing it a bit. Someone's raised, not a question, but increasingly being able to demonstrate you have an ESG strategy is a requirement when tendering. We had a long conversation and debate yesterday about procurement and supply and actually winning contracts and all those sorts of things. Do you want to embellish a little bit about how that's starting to increase?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a client who's I'll give you an example of a client. So I've got a client who's an architect's business in the UK, and their specialism is healthcare and residential, and they are having to, particularly in public sector, when they're working with in collaboration with anything that's a public sector funded initiative, they have to report back on diversity of the board, what's their environmental framework, and their what impacts are they having around carbon emissions, etc. And, do they have certain governance in place? And that could be anything from, anti-bribery and corruption policy in place. How diverse is their leadership team? How many women do they have on the board? Example. And that is because, in fact, when we presented yesterday, there was a couple of questions, as you say, Debs, for businesses who are selling into major retailers. And actually, some of the questions they're being asked is, have you got a sustainability plan in place? That's kind of secondary to the price you're going to charge us. And so I think people are probably realising and having experiences that they're asked for those things more and more.
Yes. Thank you. We've got a couple more comments that are people responding to each other, which is brilliant. There's like a whole conversation going on. So someone had replied that they thought that the governance, risk and compliance sounded like a good base, but the ESG is probably a step further in terms of sustainability and ethical leadership. Rather than just complying, it's about meeting higher standards and operating and leading the movement. What's your view on that?
I think that's a really great. I mean, I'm a real activist with these things, so I think that's a great comment. I think demonstrating that you've got things demonstrating that you have rigor in your compliance and that you're able to show that is great. But actually, being more proactive and being a force for good is always a preference.
Absolutely. And another comment just back on that tendering, that actually increasingly if you're tendering for work either in the public or the third sector, that is an absolute, you don't get any further unless you actually can demonstrate your sort of ESG credentials.
Yeah.
Is that something that, you're seeing is becoming more and more widespread, or is it really in those areas?
No, I mean, anyone who's supplying into a larger corporate. So, for example, if you're a supplier and you're supplying into a major retailer, supermarket, for example, those questions are being asked much more readily. And actually, as I just said, can be the priority, much against, is driving competition, around that rather than around pricing now. So pricing becomes secondary if you can demonstrate you've got an ethical code and you've got a sustainability plan in place. I think businesses are cutting onto it, so that they're kind of challenging each other, which is great, and they're challenging their supply chain, as well, and the value chain, which is good. And if it's not part and parcel of your world now, and for example, your supplier is a larger business and has that in place, I'd really be challenging them in terms of what are they doing as well, because I think we're all into oven, right? So I think it's only going to get things to move faster if we start holding each other to account as well.
Brilliant. Another question that's come in: is ESG best to run alongside net zero? Being a startup, there seem to be some key points to what I'm trying to achieve from the outset. Do you think that those two things absolutely sit together anyway?
I think net zero is part of ESG, really. I think net zero is your environmental piece. That's your environmental pillar. And net zero is, all the things you'd be putting your lens on around, carbon efficiencies, water, your water consumption, how things are affecting biodiversity, for example, if you're a business that uses water, but also, what's your e-waste? I speak to a lot of businesses who are service businesses or who are technology businesses, and they're saying, well, it kind of doesn't really apply for me because I'm not making anything. But actually, what's your e-waste? And what's the energy that the production of the hardware to drive your software, it is as well.
Thank you. I've got another question that was sent in ahead of the webinar, and it's quite sector specific, so it might be worth just posing it and then seeing how you think it applies to some other sectors.
Okay.
So how can architects add real social value in their day-to-day business?
Okay, well, funny enough, I work with an architect, so I probably am talking to them quite a lot about these sort of things. So I think the sector, and that professional sector has a massive opportunity from environmentally friendly buildings, sustainable practices in design, sustainable practices in working with builders and construction companies, to make sure that they're using renewable materials in the business, but also from a social point of view, it's actually, buildings that have a positive impact and are inclusive.
Yes.
So, not thinking about stairs, thinking about disabilities, thinking about elderly populations, those sort of things. The business I work does lots around in the mental health sector, and it's actually, you know, how do those designs really drive a positive social impact as well for the patients and the communities they're going to serve, really.
Okay, so almost beyond that initial, it's sort of who you deal with and who you impact.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And affordable housing as well. Affordable housing sits, you know, that architects can have a massive impact on that, really, in terms of how they design sustainably.
And a final question that I think we've just about got time for, that's just come in, really interesting. Is the space for private sector employers to deliver a financial education for financially excluded or financially vulnerable employees? So question, I think we'd all say yes, probably, but I'll hand this to you in a moment. But it also, interestingly, something that maybe could we think about developing in collaboration, maybe with a university or someone like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's lots of opportunity around financial well-being. You know, we're all feeling it, aren't we? You know, we're kind of in a perfect storm, aren't we, with the cost of living crisis as well. So I think there's help with that businesses and private sector can apply within their businesses, or collaboratively with other groups, to educate their employees and communities who are more vulnerable around how best to budget, you know, how to cook well, you know, all those types of things. I think there's huge possibilities around that, probably more so than I can say in 4 minutes, but yeah.
And interestingly, we've just started working with a new client who does exactly that, and they're going to share what they do with our population first, so we can sort of see whether that's helpful for our clients. So we are actually 4 minutes, and as always, we like to give back. So what we're going to do, I think at this stage, I'll check whether there's any final questions that we've not answered. That's great, Adnan. If you want to get in touch with that, that's brilliant. This was the guy that's raised the financial education question.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, I'd love to talk more about that. So
if anyone else wants to have an offline conversation with us, please reach out. As you can see, Vic makes it all sound very simple, which is brilliant, and cuts through to enable you to have quite a decent conversation about what you can actually get on with. Thank you so much for your questions and your interaction and getting involved in Slido. We've really enjoyed delivering the webinar. We will send the recording out and obviously a version of the slides so that you'll get all of that through. If you've got any queries at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you so much for your time, and enjoy your 3 minutes that you've got back.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.